Hey, Jeff from Become More Compelling here. I want to give you another people skills tip. So this is actually a larger tip that is really important if you've ever had kind of that flashpoint moment where you know you want to change something about your life. For a lot of my students and clients, that is wanting to be better with people. So wanting to improve their social skills, want to connect with people better, want to be more charismatic. So that's a lot of what I see. But this will also help if there's just some opportunity or something that you know that you want. How do you take that next step and move into action? So the topic today is wanting versus deciding. And so full disclosure, I got this from Scott Adams, who's the Dilbert guy, and he also wrote a book called How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big, which is fantastic. I was listening to a chapter of it this morning. So what he outlines is wanting versus deciding. So you can want something really bad, but it really doesn't mean a whole lot until you decide that you're going to do it. So an example of this might be like, oh, I want to run a marathon. Oh, I really want to run a marathon. I want to run a half marathon, whatever it is. Well, that's great. And you might tell your friends like, hey, I want to do this. And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. But there comes a moment where either one of two things happens with that person. Either one, they just decide, or they say, I know I really want this, but it's just not a priority, or I should really do it, but I'm busy, whatever it is. And that's one path. The other path, and the people who actually execute, like they get to a point and they decide. They say, okay, you know what? This is a priority for me and I'm going to get it done no matter what it takes. The example Adams uses is years ago, back when people could smoke indoors, which I know for a lot of us, that just seems like an alien world. So he worked at a bank and people would smoke indoors, and he has asthma. So it really wasn't a really good fit for him, but it was kind of the norm. People smoked indoors. That was just what happened. So a lot of people in the office didn't really want people to smoke indoors. They wanted a smoke-free environment. Plenty of people wanted it, and even Adams did too. But at one point he said, you know what? It's time. I'm deciding that I am going to be in a smoke-free environment. As it turns out, the company had handed out these like health forms that everyone had to sign, and big long policy. And he read it, and in that policy, there was a clause that said that my workplace is free of carcinogens, or you should stay away from carcinogens. And so he's like, So what he does is brilliant. He goes home, and then he doesn't come to work the next day. He calls in and says, hey, you know what? I would love to be at work, but for my safety, I just can't go. And so a day goes by, his boss calls him. They have a conversation. The next day, his boss's boss calls him. They have that same conversation. They're like, are you serious? The third day, his boss's boss calls him and says, are you serious? So lo and behold, the result was, they changed their policy, or they changed the operation to conform with the policy that they had already written. So this was their own policy. They were just confirming. And so there was no smoke in the kind of the cubicle area, and anyone that smoked either was like a manager with their door closed, or they had smoking outside. So that's the difference between wanting and deciding. Once he decided that he wasn't going to be in that environment, then he was able to find things like this health form with this policy. And he's like, okay, that's my in, and that's what I'm going to do. So say that you have wanted to improve your people skills. So plenty of people want to do that. How can I be a better communicator? How can I tell better stories? How can I be more engaging, more charismatic? Plenty of people want that. But until you take that next leap and say to yourself, okay, I've decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to work on my people skills. I'm going to read articles on becomemorecompelling.com, for example. And I'm going to put in the work and put in the time to improve this area of my life. Until you get to that point where you decide, and once you decide, it's ironclad. Like it is a kind of a line in the sand that you've drawn, and say to yourself, hey, I'm going to move heaven or earth to get this thing. So where in your life have you not crossed the threshold yet. Like, we all have a lot of things we want to do, but do you have any things that you have wanted to do for a long time and you finally decided, like, okay, I'm going to do it, and whatever it takes, I know that there's work involved, I am going to do this thing? Where in your life is that? So if you key in on what you want to decide to do, what that also means is that, like the burner analogy, like you've got like relationships, career, and I think friendships. You can only have 2 to 3 burners on at one time. So the stuff that you want to do, that you know you're not going to decide to do, you might have to turn some of that stuff down in favor of the things that you have decided that you are going to do. So life is full of trade-offs, and that is a worthy trade-off to make, because it focuses you and it puts you in a position where you can succeed, because you're not trying to keep all of your options open, which is a smart person's trap that a lot of people fall into. Sometimes the best thing you can do is actually close a few doors so that you can focus on that one door, that one thing that you really, really want, and really go after it. So that's our tip for today. If you have any questions that you would like to see me answer, any topics that you'd like me to cover, you can send me an email at jeff@becomemorecompelling.com or the Jeff Callahan on Instagram and Twitter. And with that, I will see you next time on Compelling Convos.